Welcome back to the Mastermind course. Today I've got Quantum here. Quantum is a friend of mine. We've been talking for a few months, and he has an incredibly interesting story of how he found SHIB back in the last bull run, very, very early days, accumulating a pretty significant portion of the supply and making a bunch of money. Potentially could have made a lot more money, but learning ultimately a lot of lessons along the way. And the lessons that he learned from the investment that he made back in SHIB in the last bull run is super interesting. And a lot of it relates back to what I teach you guys in this course, which is about building a thesis, having conviction on the investments that you make, and trying to see into the future of what's possible with the investments that you make so that you don't exit them too early and so you don't exit them too late as well. So Quantum, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate your time. How about you give us a bit of an introduction into yourself, and then we can start from there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Dan. So a little bit of background, I've been involved in the crypto markets now since I was about 18, and it's been about 10 years now. And so I've seen a lot of these market cycles, and I've seen the behavior of how these market cycles ebb and flow. Early on when I got started, I was participating in things like Ethereum Classic, and I was participating in BitShares and, things like on Poloniex, like way back in the day. And I remember that there used to be some of these coins like Verge that, were at 1 to 2 Satoshis that ended up running to like 1,000 or 2,000. And I was thinking to myself, like, that really is where the big money's made. I mean, Ethereum Classic could have gone 5x, 10x, whatever. And I had sat there and thought about and remembered from the lessons of, 2016 and 17 when Verge had went to 1,000 Satoshis, and that was a 1,000x opportunity. And I thought at some point, well, first I originally thought that would never happen again. And over time, I realized that the same scenarios were setting up again for that potentially in the future. And so, I've been trading now I've been managing my family accounts, and essentially you could say I'm a family account manager, family fund manager. I've been doing this now for about 8 years, and I've learned a lot of lessons throughout these years. And I've been through, 3 market cycles up to this point. And so, about 2021, I ended up clearing, mid 8 figures. And this was, off the back of the entire COVID run. I mean, anybody that was around during that time, you could have been, genuinely speaking, you could have been in any market and you would have made money. That's the reality. And you could have bought anything in the stock market, anything in crypto, and you would have made money. The question is, or the reality is, not a lot of people protected that money.
Yep.
And so I learned a very valuable lesson super quickly. 2018, I lost everything. I went from 3 mil down to negative. I was 200K in debt, and I owed my family money. I owed everybody money. It was a tragic experience, but I ended up coming back from 30K to 17 million in 2021. And that taught me a tremendous amount of lessons. And one thing I'd say is that you really have no idea how bad somebody can be down until you're actually in those shoes where you owe money, you're in debt. And then to come out of that, you realize that the future is really unbounded. You have endless opportunities as long as you change your behavior and you learn new things. And so, it's been a long time, and I have a lot of stories. And, even though I ended up coming up to that point of crossing mid 8 figures, I have stories of missing hundreds of millions. And, I'm still haunted to some degree by those stories, but I have chosen to learn from them now and chosen to pass on these lessons to anyone that could get some value out of it. And so as much as I hate the fact that $100 million miss is now a story time for a bunch of people, and I wish the story was that I made 100 million, at the end of the day, if somebody could get value out of this and actually benefit off of this, then to me, I'm adding good karma in the world. And so, and that's what we're doing this for.
That's so true. That's so true. And you say 100 mil, and that's probably more a humble answer of what you could have made, which is the funny thing, which is the funny part of this story. So how about you give us a bit of context into the whole situation with SHIB? Because that's the main thing I think we want to cover, the story of SHIB, and how you found it, how much you bought of it, how much it could have been worth, the lessons of that whole process. Yeah, how about you give us like the story of how that came to play?
Absolutely. So the original thinking that went into place at the time was, I had saw, like I said, Verge take off, and it was a 1,000x move, and I didn't pay much attention to it. But as time went on, my primary focus was, how can I get to the damn money? That's all I care about. I don't care what I'm buying. I just want to extract the most money possible from the market when we have these hype cycles. That led me to Uniswap at the time, because one thing I had noticed in these markets was that every time there was a new exchange or a new idea, it was this idea that you have like the virgin markets and the virgin coins pump the hardest. The coins that don't have any bag holders, there's nobody in it. And there was an old saying that we used to use in some of the ecosystems I was in, and you had a difference between the coins that had market cycles and those that had no market cycles, and they were just in accumulation. The coins that had no bag holders tend to move more. I mean, if we look at the example right now, take a look at, well, first of all, let's go to 2021. Compare Shiba Inu to Doge. Doge moved. It was like a 50x or 100x, but Shiba Inu was like 1,000x. Compare it to now, you have Sol. Sol performed great, but you also have Tia, and you have C or Say, whatever it's called. And these two outperformed Solana. And so you have, well, depending on where you got in, but generally speaking, the coins that have no bag holders tend to see the most upside when it's a fresh market. And so that led me to Uniswap. And at that time, Uniswap was relatively new. And I was thinking to myself, back when Plenix first came around, back when Binance first came around, there was a bunch of 100x's that were fostered off of Plenix. There was a bunch of 100x's that were fostered off of Binance. And so when Uniswap was first coming around, I thought to myself, something here has to be 1,000x. And originally I had 10 different alts that I had picked up. And I had slowly sifted my attention down. And by the way, 8 of them practically went to zero. 2 of them started moving. And when 2 of them started moving and made up for the rest, I started doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on those. Those 2 ended up being Shiba Inu and Hex. And so I had an idea to sift through like a bunch of the crap that was on there. And here's the reality. People think it's as hard. People think it's like you have to get as lucky as winning the lottery. Not really. If you sift through the amount of alts that are on Uniswap that aren't like just complete rugs with 10K liquidity or 5K liquidity, your chances were much higher to land 1,000x than ever winning the lottery, like hands down. It's the same thing like whenever, on Solana, when you had some of these coins that recently hit the market and went like 1,000x or 2,000x, your chances of landing that was much higher than winning the lottery. And, at that time, kind of taking me back to 2020, when I bought 2% of Sheep Supply, my idea was that it would reach a relative market cap of a tenth of Doge at the time. And it was reasonable given Uniswap was fresh on the scene. And we had just started to have liquidity being onboarded onto the Ethereum de facto DEX. And my projected outcome was around 10 to 20 mil profit in the thesis that I had. And I had a mental thesis that would have allowed me to hold at least into 50 million, despite the bag running to legitimately 400 to 500 million. The reality is that I would have never held to 400 to 500 million. That was not, that's not, even though that's what it became, that wasn't part of what I would have done. If I followed my thesis though, it would have allowed me to at least extract 50 to 100 million if I followed it the way I intended. And so, at that time, after the 8 started to go down, originally it was like 1% size on 10 of those. So it was 10% of my portfolio being, at the highest risk possible, coins on Uniswap. 8 of them pretty much went to nothing. 2 of them started to move, and I started to double down on those. And at some point, I decided to get rid of Hex, and I actually ended up sizing in way too heavy into Shiba Inu. And I was convicted that this was it. And I was telling the whole world, I was telling all my friends, this is it. And I had the whole thesis mapped out in regards to when I was going to exit, what the market cap would be, to not look at the chart because the chart's going to eject me. I really had it all mapped out. My problem was that I did not follow my thesis. Did not follow it. I did not have it written out. I did not have it. When times got tough, which they did, when I was buying Shiba originally, I was buying, I can't remember the exact market cap, but I held it down 70 to 80%. I wasn't even looking at that. I was looking at how much of the supply I owned. I didn't even care. 3 months into like me holding it, my idea started to erode away. I told everybody about it. People were telling me it could be a rug pull, it could be this. And a lot of people were kind of devaluing the idea around me. And so over time, there was a bit of embarrassment that started to seep in, not to mention that my position size ended up becoming way larger than I intended. Like it was supposed to be like 1% of my portfolio or a few percent, and I ended up making it like it was like 8 or 10% at the time, and I ended up making it way larger than I intended, which led to me becoming a helicopter parent, right? I ended up becoming a helicopter managing the position when you can't do that to something that has that much volatility. Like volatility is the price you pay if you want to see a tremendous amount of upside. And like if you overexert your position size or overexert your hand, you're not the exception. Like you will eject yourself. There is no way that you're going to end up holding and somehow be the miraculous exception to where you held with a very large position size through all the volatility, unless you somehow turn off the amygdala in your brain, which, I mean, congratulations if you're David Goggins and you can just turn off the amygdala in your brain and end up holding it through. But the reality is, for most of us, you can't do that. So you need to have a thesis and a process to follow, to where when times get tough, you refer back to that model, that mental model and that thesis, that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because times will get tough. There's no free money in the world. Livermore said if there was, nobody would be forcing it in your pocket, even when it comes to meme coins. There's no free lunch. So, that's kind of what, I was led to Uniswap, and I was led to, Dogecoin was to Bitcoin as X at that time was to Ethereum. And I was looking for that X. Shiba Inu was really one of the first contenders on the scene that had spurted out of Uniswap that had the highest potential. I mean, one of the days we had, I think like 5 or 10 mil that was bought randomly. Like this thing went from dust to no liquidity, dust to like 300x in a day. And randomly there was like 5 or 10 mil that was bought on the market. And I knew that something was up. Like no one's going to do that and buy vaporware for no reason without knowing that something else is coming. And so to me, this was like a signal that potentially this could be the next, this is going to be the next meme coin that gets listed on Coinbase and all these other exchanges. And so that was the first data point that really caused the hairs to stand up on my neck, that there's something happening here and I need to pay attention. And this could be like the very early beginnings of, the de facto meme on Ethereum. And, there's a saying that people use, maybe you guys have heard it, maybe you haven't, depending on where you are in the world: same shit, different toilet. And the reality is that you're going to continue to get these reskinned memes over time. Like, Livermore said, patterns repeat because human nature hasn't changed for thousands of years. He also said that there's nothing new in Wall Street. There can't be, because speculation is as old as the hills. Whatever happens in the stock market today has happened before and will happen again. That means, for alts and memes included, whatever has happened before is going to happen again. And if we can identify the behavior patterns and the cycles, the life cycles of these, history doesn't exactly repeat, but it rhymes, as Mark Twain said, right? So if we take a look at something like Toshi, kind of bringing us into to Toshi now, there are some similarities. There are differences, but there are similarities, and you're never going to have two things that rhyme exactly the same. It's just not possible. I mean, people looked at the Ethereum and Solana fractal and said there are some similarities here, but the reality is that Solana overshot the region of where it could have got rejected. Went way higher. And you're never going to have two things that look exactly the same. And I think that when you delude yourself into thinking that it will be the exact same. It will never be exactly the same. There will never be another bonk. There will never be another Shiba Inu, but they'll rhyme the same. It could be another 100x. It could be another 500x. But there are behavioral patterns and there are behavioral data points that you can identify to lead you to that similarity. And so, so that's, I'll leave that there, in regards to, what led me to it. And, you can see that one of my biggest mistakes that I had made was position size ended up becoming too big. I mean, you can have conviction, but when something comes around like a meme coin of that nature, you can't game the system, in my opinion. You can't over position size. You will over manage.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean game the system?
You can't game your mind. You can't sit there and be like, I'm different. I'm the exception. I can hold 50% of my portfolio in this. I will be peaceful about it. Days will turn into weeks will turn into months, and panic will set in when you're down 70, 80%. Mm-hmm. What have you done? And your amygdala will start to take over. And the amygdala is responsible for essentially like fear, right? And once you're hijacked psychologically, you're no longer in control of the decision making. You're going to do something that doesn't follow your thesis, doesn't follow your plan, doesn't follow your model. So like you got to have a solid model and thesis, but also have a position size that's respectable enough to kind of fuse with that thesis. And so the